From Tsars to Soviets. How Russia exploded in 1917. Imagine an empire so vast it stretched from frozen tundras to sunlit shores, ruled by a man who thought divine right was a substitute for leadership and whose wife took advice from a bearded mystic who wouldn't die even after being poisoned, shot, and drowned. Sounds like fiction? Welcome to Russia, 1917. This is the story of how a loaf of bread sparked a revolution, how a failed coup turned rebels into heroes, and how two exiled revolutionaries, Lenin and Trotsky, hijacked history with slogans, rifles, and a whole lot of nerve. And trust me, you won't want to miss the ending. Once upon a time in 1894, Nicholas II inherited the Russian Empire, a sprawling land of 126 million souls, 194 ethnic groups, and precisely zero chill. While peasants toiled in misery and workers dodged starvation, the Romanovs sipped champagne in palatial splendor. Nicholas, a man more suited to stamp collecting than statecraft, ruled with divine indifference. Fast forward to 1905, the people, fed up with being treated like serfs in a soap opera, revolted. The Tsar, rattled but not dethroned, offered a shiny new Duma, parliament, with all the power of a decorative teapot. Reformers were unimpressed. Nicholas sulked. Russia simmered. Then came 1914. World War I crashed into Russia like a vodka-fueled bear on ice skates. The army suffered catastrophic defeats. The economy tanked. Bread vanished. Nicholas, now commander-in-chief, was blamed for everything from battlefield blunders to bad weather. Meanwhile, his German-born wife Alexandra was accused of being a secret agent for the Kaiser, and the royal family fell under the spell of Grigory Rasputin, a bearded Siberian mystic with a flair for healing and scandal. Rasputin's influence was so toxic that in December 1916, aristocrats, possibly with British help, decided to solve the problem with poison, bullets, and a river. Rasputin died hard, but not before dragging the monarchy's reputation through the mud. On the 23rd of February 1917, Petrograd's women stormed the streets for International Women's Day, demanding bread. The next day, workers and students joined in, chanting, "Down with the Tsar." Soldiers ordered to suppress the uprising said, "Nah," and joined the crowd instead. Police stations were torched, Tsarist symbols smashed, and the capital descended into revolutionary chaos. Nicholas, still clinging to his crown like a toddler to a toy, was told by his ministers, "It's over, Nick." On the 2nd of March, he abdicated. Just like that, 300 years of Romanov rule evaporated like vodka in the sun. The Duma formed a provisional government, promising democracy and justice. But they had to share power with the Petrograd Soviet, a council of workers and soldiers who controlled the city's troops, transport, and telegraphs. Think of it as a political ménage à trois with trust issues. The Soviet, dominated by socialist revolutionaries and Mensheviks, shockingly agreed to continue the war. This decision was like trying to fix a broken samovar with more boiling water. Enter the Bolsheviks. Vladimir Lenin, fresh from exile and armed with the slogan "Bread, Peace, Land," was not here to make friends. He wanted land for peasants, peace for soldiers, and power for Soviets. His ideas spread like wildfire in a drought. In June, a new military offensive flopped spectacularly. 400,000 casualties, mass desertions, and morale so low it needed a shovel. In July, Petrograd exploded again. Soldiers, sailors, and workers, egged on by Bolsheviks, rose up. The Provisional Government responded with bullets and arrests. Trotsky was jailed. Lenin fled to Finland disguised as Konstantin Ivanov, proving that revolutionaries also dabble in cosplay. Alexander Kerensky, a charismatic socialist, became prime minister. He was hailed as Russia's savior. But General Kornilov, the army's commander, thought Kerensky was too soft and tried to march on Petrograd to restore order. Kerensky panicked and armed the Bolsheviks to stop Kornilov. The coup failed, but the Bolsheviks now had weapons, street cred, and momentum. By October, Lenin and Trotsky were ready. The Bolsheviks seized power in a swift, almost theatrical coup. The provisional government was toast. The Soviet era had begun. If you're loving this wild ride, don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and follow us so you never miss a story that rewrites history. It's August 1917. Russia is a hot mess. The provisional government, led by Alexander Kerensky, is trying to hold the country together with duct tape and optimism. Meanwhile, General Lavur Kornilov, Russia's answer to a military strongman with a flair for drama, decides that the only way to save Mother Russia is to march on Petrograd and restore order. Translation: squash the Soviets, silence the Bolsheviks, and maybe crown himself emperor of everything. Kerensky, panicking like a man who just realized he gave his house keys to a burglar, turns to the Bolsheviks, the very people he'd been locking up days earlier. He releases Lenin and Trotsky from prison, hands out rifles like candy, and says, "Please save us." Trotsky, never one to miss a revolutionary party, organizes the Red Guards, armed Bolshevik militias, and stations them at key points in the city. Railway workers, many of them Bolshevik fans, go on strike, derailing Kornilov's troops, literally. Soldiers begin defecting, disappearing, or deciding that revolution sounds more fun than marching. The Kornilov affair ends not with a bang, but with a whimper. Kornilov's coup collapses, and the Bolsheviks emerge as the heroes of the hour. By September, they've gained a majority in the Petrograd Soviet. Lenin, still hiding in Finland under the alias Konstantin Ivanov, because why not, sees his moment. In October, Lenin sneaks back into Petrograd like a revolutionary ninja. He's pale, intense, and ready to flip the chessboard. On the 25th of October, or 7th November if you're using the Gregorian calendar, the Bolsheviks make their move. Red Guards and loyal troops seize bridges, telegraph stations, and key buildings. That night, they storm the Winter Palace, home of the Provisional Government, in a scene later dramatized by Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein, with more extras than a Marvel movie. Kerensky flees in a borrowed car, narrowly avoiding capture. The next day, at the Second All-Russian Congress of Soviets, Lenin announces the Provisional Government is toast. The Bolsheviks are now in charge. But power doesn't come easy. Russia plunges into a brutal civil war between the Bolshevik Reds and the counter-revolutionary Whites, who are backed by foreign powers and nostalgic monarchists. Some Whites dream of restoring Tsar Nicholas II to the throne. Nicholas, however, is busy gardening. After his abdication, he and his family are held at Tsarskoye Selo, then moved to Tobolsk in Siberia, where they live under house arrest in the governor's mansion. It's all tea and embroidery until spring 1918, when the Bolsheviks move them to Yekaterinburg. In July 1918, as white forces approach the city, the Bolsheviks decide they can't risk a royal rescue. They gather the entire Romanov family, Nicholas, Alexandra, their son Alexei, daughters Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, plus 4 loyal servants, into a cellar and execute them. It's a grim, tragic end to the imperial saga. The civil war rages on. 2 million soldiers perish. Typhus and famine claim 9 million civilians. Russia becomes a graveyard of dreams and ideologies. By 1921, the Bolsheviks emerge victorious. Lenin, now the undisputed leader, begins building a new socialist order. In 1922, the Soviet Union is born, a state forged in revolution, blood, and iron will. It would go on to defeat Nazi Germany in World War II and become a global superpower. But it would remain a one-party state, where dissent was crushed and democracy was a distant memory. The hopes of the February Revolution, of freedom, justice, and representation, were extinguished in the October Revolution's blaze. And for decades, Russia would live under the shadow of Lenin's legacy. After the dust of civil war settled and the Soviet Union was born in 1922, Lenin stood at the helm of a new world. But his health was failing, and behind the scenes a power struggle was brewing like a samovar left too long on the fire. Enter Joseph Stalin, a man with a mustache thick enough to hide 1,000 secrets and a political instinct sharper than a Cossack saber. While Trotsky, Lenin's brilliant comrade-in-arms, was busy writing essays and giving speeches, Stalin was quietly stacking the deck, placing loyalists in key positions and mastering the art of bureaucratic chess. When Lenin died in 1924, his final testament warned against Stalin's growing power. But that document was quietly buried, along with any hopes of a more democratic socialism. Trotsky was outmaneuvered, exiled, and eventually assassinated in Mexico with an ice pick to the head. Stalin didn't just win the game, he flipped the board and declared himself the referee. Stalin's vision for the USSR was simple: industrialize or perish. The 5-year plans turned peasants into factory workers, villages into smokestacks, and the countryside into a forced labor zone. Grain was seized, quotas were brutal, and dissent was met with exile, or worse. The Great Purge of the 1930s was Stalin's paranoia on parade. Millions were arrested, tortured, or executed. Party members, generals, poets, professors, no one was safe. Even the revolution's old guard, those who had stormed the Winter Palace with Lenin, were dragged into show trials and shot as enemies of the people. The Soviet Union was becoming a superpower, yes, but it was also becoming a prison of fear. Then came World War II. Hitler's invasion in 1941 caught Stalin off guard, but the Soviet response was ferocious. Entire cities were razed, millions died, and the siege of Leningrad became a symbol of unbreakable resistance. By 1945, the Red Army had marched into Berlin. The Soviet flag flew over the Reichstag. The USSR had paid the highest price, over 20 million lives, but emerged as one of two global superpowers. Yet victory brought no peace. The Cold War began almost immediately. An iron curtain fell across Europe, and the USSR became a fortress of ideology, locked in a nuclear stare-down with the United States. Behind the curtain, life was a mix of pride and paranoia, progress and propaganda. After Stalin's death in 1953, Nikita Khrushchev took the reins and shocked the world by denouncing Stalin's crimes. The thaw began, brief, uneven, but real. There were space triumphs, Sputnik, Gagarin, kitchen debates, and a Cuban Missile Crisis that nearly ended the world. But the system remained rigid. Dissent was still dangerous. Writers were censored, reformers sidelined, and the KGB kept a close eye on everyone's typewriter. By the 1980s, the Soviet economy was stagnating. Enter Mikhail Gorbachev with two magic words: glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring. He tried to reform the system from within, but instead he cracked it open. In 1991, after a failed coup and a wave of independence movements, the Soviet Union dissolved. Just like that, the red flag came down over the Kremlin. The Cold War ended not with a bang, but with a bureaucratic whimper. Russia entered a new era, chaotic, capitalist, and uncertain. The dreams of 1917 had long since curdled, but their echoes lingered in every statue, every street name, every scar. Today, the legacy of the Russian Revolution still looms large. It reshaped the 20th century, inspired revolutions and rebellions across the globe, and left behind a cautionary tale of how utopian dreams can become dystopian nightmares. From the icy corridors of the Winter Palace to the gulags of Siberia, from Lenin's fiery speeches to Stalin's iron grip, from the hope of February to the hammer of October, this was not just a revolution. It was a reckoning. And it all began with a loaf of bread, a mystic's whisper, and a people who dared to dream. Enjoyed the revolution? Hit subscribe, tap the bell, and follow us for more history that hits hard.